"Do not close your eyes," the Duke of Hetherington said. "Look at me. Roselle Quinby, look at me. You may sleep at dawn and not 1 minute before it. And if you argue, I shall talk to you about turnips until you are grateful for the storm." She had been quiet too long, that was the thing. For an hour she had answered him, and for the last 10 minutes she had only breathed. And Alaric Ferrers had seen men go exactly that way in Portugal, quiet, and then quieter, and then gone. And he had no intention whatever of letting it happen 4 miles from his own gates. The Ford at Barrow Mill had taken the mail coach at 9:30. He had been riding home from the assizes with his hat down against the rain when he came over the rise and saw the lamps at the wrong angle, low and swinging, and heard, under the noise of the water, a woman shouting instructions. Not screaming, shouting instructions. That detail stayed with him afterward more than any other. The coach lay over on its side in the middle of a ford that had been 8 inches deep at noon, and was now 4 feet of brown water going like a mill race, and the driver was down and being got up the bank by the guard, and a woman in a soaked gray cloak was braced in the doorway of the tilted coach, holding a fat gentleman by the collar, and telling him, with tremendous clarity, to put his foot on the window frame and not on her arm. Alaric put his horse into the water. What followed took perhaps 11 minutes, and he never afterward could put the order of it together properly. He got the fat gentleman out, and then an elderly clergyman's widow who had fainted and was therefore easier, and passed them to the guard on the bank. He remembers shouting at the woman in gray to come out and being told, quite shortly, that there was still the boy who rode with the mail bags on the roof, and that she could reach him and the Duke could not, and being obliged to admit that this was true. He remembers the coach shifting on the stones with a sound like a gate coming off its hinges. He remembers the mail lad going past him hand over hand along the trace, and the woman coming after him with the water at her waist and reaching for her, and the coach going over the last time, and how the whole of the river seemed for a moment to be between his fingers. He got her under the arms at the second attempt and dragged her up the bank on his knees, and she was not, thank heaven, unconscious. She lay in the mud in the rain and coughed up half the barrow and then said, quite distinctly, "The bags. There are 2 on the roof and one is a doctor's letters." "Madam," said Alaric, "I am going to say something now that I shall regret, and then we are going to be sensible. The bags may drown." Her horse could not carry 4, and the ford was gone, and Barrow Mill was 2 miles back with the road under water between. The guard took the widow and the fat gentleman, and the mail lad up the lane to the miller's on foot, all of them able to walk, and all of them shouting at each other companionably in the way of people who have just survived something. The woman in gray stood up, took 3 steps, and went down on one knee in the road, and did not get up again on her own. And Alaric Ferrers understood in that moment that the arithmetic had changed, and that the nearest roof was Waite's hut on the hill, and that everything about the next 9 hours was going to be improper. He put her on his horse, and he did not ask her permission. Waite's hut was 1 room of dry stone with a slate roof and a hearth, kept for the shepherds at lambing, and it had, he thanked God on his knees for the man's methodical soul, a stack of cut furs, a tinder box in a tin, 3 horse blankets folded in a chest against the damp, and half a sack of oats. He got the fire going in 6 minutes. The wind came round the door, and the rain went over the roof in waves like a hand passing over it, and he set her on the chest nearest the hearth, wrapped in 2 blankets over her own soaked cloak, and hung his coat on the peg because it was wetter than useless. And then he stood on the far side of the fire with his back to the wall, and did not come nearer than 4 feet for the rest of the night. That was the rule he made in the first 30 seconds and did not break, the fire between them, and the door on the latch and not barred, and every word spoken across the flames, as though the whole county stood listening at the window. He was aware that in the morning the county would consider it a technicality. He kept to it anyway, for her sake, and because he found that he wished to. "Your name," he said. "Roselle Quinby." "Where were you going, Miss Quinby?" "To Hetherington." A pause. "To the great house. I am to be second lady's maid to the Duchess." "There is no Duchess." "To the Duke's mother, then," she said, with the patience of a person too cold for correction, "or his aunt, or whoever it is that the housekeeper wrote about. Mrs. Ilbert of Hetherington engaged me by letter at £18 a year. I have never seen the place." Her teeth were going. "I am from Marlbrook. My mother mended lace. She is dead now. There was nothing left to mend." Alaric fed the fire. He decided on the spot not to tell her. She was shaking hard for the first hour, which he was glad of, and then she began to stop, which frightened him more, and then her answers got shorter, and then they stopped altogether, and that was when he said the thing about her eyes. "Talk to me," he said. "Tell me about the lace." "It is very dull. I have sat through 4 days of assizes. I am extremely well prepared for dull." So she told him about the lace, in a thin voice, with her chin on her knees. Marlbrook ground and Marlbrook flowers, and the way her mother pricked her patterns on parchment with a needle and kept them rolled in a stocking, and how there were 11 of them, and how they had been in the family since her great-grandmother, and how she had sold the pillow and the bobbins for the coach fare, but had the 11 patterns still, sewn into the lining of her work-bag, which was at the bottom of the barrow, along with everything else she owned in the world. She said the last part without weeping. He thought that was the worst of it. "Then I shall tell you what happens next," said Alaric. "In the morning my grooms will come along the top road looking for me, because I am 4 hours late and Lambert is a fussing old woman. You will be taken to a warm house and given dry clothes and a bed and a great deal of soup, and I shall have 4 men in the barrow at first light with drags and ropes, and if a leather work-bag is in that river, Miss Quinby, I shall have it out of it." "You cannot promise that." "No," he agreed, "but you may hold me to the 4 men." Her eyes were shut again. "Roselle," he said, using her Christian name, which was the second rule he broke that night, and he did it deliberately, because a shout will not reach a person that far down and a name sometimes will. "Roselle Quinby, count the 11 patterns for me, aloud, from the first." There was a long, dreadful pause. Then from inside the blankets, in a voice like a thread, "Marlbrook ground, bride's crown, the 4-leaf, the 5-leaf." "Go on," said the Duke of Hetherington, and did not sit down, and did not sleep, and did not once cross the fire for 7 hours. Lambert found them at 20 minutes past 6 with 4 men and 2 lanterns, and stopped in the doorway of Waite's hut, and looked at his master standing against the far wall in shirt-sleeves, and at the young woman asleep sitting up in 3 blankets on the other side of a dying fire, and said, with the magnificent blankness of a groom who has served 30 years, "Your Grace's horse is lame in the near fore. Then he shall walk. Send Tom for a cart. And Lambert, the door has been on the latch all night, and I have not been within 4 feet of her, and you may say so to anyone who asks you, and you will be asked." "Yes, your Grace." "Also, I want 4 men in the barrow below the ford by full light, with drags. There is a leather work-bag, about so big, with a brass catch." Lambert's eyebrows moved perhaps 1/8 of an inch. "The mail bags, your Grace." "The work-bag first," said Alaric. "The county had it by Tuesday, of course. By Wednesday it had it in 3 versions, and by Friday the best of them held that the Duke of Hetherington had spent a whole night in a shepherd's hut with a lady's maid, and had been discovered at dawn in his shirt-sleeves, and Mrs. Grantham of Kelder Priors was heard to observe at a dinner of 19 people that of course the girl had probably arranged the whole thing, since a Ford does not overturn a mail coach without help. Alaric heard that particular sentence repeated to him by his own aunt, in his own morning room, with satisfaction. "You will send her away," said Lady Sophronia, "quietly with money, and it will be forgotten by Christmas." He looked at the old woman for a while. "Aunt, Miss Quinby went out along the trace of an overturning coach, in 4 feet of flood water in the dark, to fetch a boy off the roof. I have it from the guard, the driver, the male lad, and a Bath alderman of 18 stone, all of whom she pulled out before anyone thought to pull out her. She is the bravest person I have ever stood beside, and I stood beside a good many at Vittoria." He set down his cup. "I shall not be sending her anywhere. And the next person who says in my hearing that she arranged it may explain to me how a woman arranges a river." They dragged the barrow for 3 days and got the mail bags on the first morning and nothing else. On the 4th day, a shepherd's dog found a leather work-bag with a brass catch in a willow snag 1.5 miles below the ford, sodden, split along one seam, and inside a wrapping of oiled silk that had been sewn in by a woman who knew what water does to parchment, 11 lace patterns, pricked by hand, entirely undamaged. He carried it up to the housekeeper's room himself, and did not stay, because he had begun to understand what he was doing and thought it dishonorable to be watched doing it. She was 6 weeks recovering. "Pneumonia," said the doctor, and then not pneumonia after all, and then a great deal of exhaustion and a bad chest, and she was nursed in the blue room by Mrs. Ilbert on the Duke's orders, and never once asked to lift a duster. He visited it correctly. The door open, Mrs. Ilbert in the corner with her mending, 20 minutes at a time, 3 times a week. He brought her the estate's account of the flood damage because she asked to see it, and then he brought it again because she had questions, and then he brought other things because he had run out of excuses and stopped bothering with them. In November she was well and dressed, and standing in the middle of his library with her hands folded, giving her notice. "I cannot stay, your grace. Mrs. Ilbert says you are the best hand with fine linen she has had in 20 years. Mrs. Ilbert is kind. The rest of the house is kind, which is worse." Her chin came up. It was, he had learned, the thing she did instead of trembling. "There are 19 people between here and Bath who believe I contrived a flood to catch a duke. If I stay in your house, I confirm it every day I draw breath. So I shall go to Marlbrook, where my mother's name is still good, and I shall mend lace, and in 5 years I shall be a woman who once had an accident on a coach. And if I asked you to marry me—" The room went very still. "Then I should say no," said Roselle Quinby, "because you would be doing it to mend my name, and I have spent my whole life mending things, and I know exactly what a repair looks like. I will not be a piece of fine work you did on your conscience." Alaric Ferrers stood at his own hearth and discovered that he was, for the first time in 11 years, absolutely at a loss, and that he liked it. "Very well," he said, "go to Marlbrook." She went. He wrote to her the following week, a plain letter about the rebuilding of the ford, because it was the only subject on which they had a legitimate correspondence, and because a woman who had asked to see the damage accounts would read it. She replied in 9 days briefly, and pointed out that the culvert he proposed was too narrow, which was true, and which cost him £40 to alter and saved him, 3 winters later, the whole bridge. They wrote every week for 7 months. He learned in December that she sang while she worked and could not carry a tune. In January she told him about her mother's last winter, and he told her about Portugal, which he had told nobody, not even his aunt, in 11 years. In March he sent her, at her own request and to his own bafflement, £6 of good hemp thread and a written promise not to send anything else. In April, she wrote that 3 girls in Marlbrook were learning the 11 patterns from her at a penny a lesson, and that she had never in her life been so tired or so pleased. In May, he rode to Marlbrook, 61 miles, and stood in the door of a cottage full of lace pillows with his hat in his hand. "I am not here to mend anything," said Alaric. "I have thought about your objection every day since November, and I concede the whole of it. So I have come to say the other thing instead, which is true and which I should have said in the library and did not know how. Roselle, I have kept a shepherd's hut in my head for 8 months, not the flood, the hut. You counted 11 lace patterns for me at 3 in the morning, because I asked you to, and because you would not give up, and I stood on the other side of that fire and thought, there she is. The person I have been waiting to meet since I was a boy, and she is a lace-mender from Marlbrook, and I nearly rode past the ford. She had a bobbin in her hand, and she did not put it down, and her eyes were bright. Say the rest of it, she said. I love you. There is no repair in it anywhere. If you will not have me, I shall write to you about culverts until one of us dies, but I should very much rather marry you. Roselle Quinby set down the bobbin. Then you had better ask Marlbrook's opinion, she said, because I have 3 pupils and they are listening at the window, and they have been listening for a quarter of an hour. They were married in Marlbrook Church in July, and the bride wore a veil of Marlbrook ground with the bride's crown pattern worked round the hem, made by her own hands and finished by 3 girls at a penny a lesson. And the fat gentleman from the Bath coach came uninvited, wept loudly, and had to be given a chair. The 11 parchment patterns hang framed in the long corridor at Hetherington, where the light is good, and the Duke shows them to visitors whether they ask or not. He tells them that the woman who saved 4 lives at Barrow Ford carried these in an old silk lining, because she knew what water does, and that she nearly died on a hillside afterward, and would not sleep, because he asked her not to, and that he has been obeying her ever since, and considers it the best arrangement he has ever entered into.